In this video, we're going to look at getting started in VS Code with Python for doing the first activity where we're creating a summary table. If you already know how to use Python, you don't need this video. This is not a Python tutorial so much as a how to use Copilot or generative AI to help you learn Python. And I'll show you some of the mistakes that happen, some of the challenges, and how to work around them in order to get answers. You don't have to use Copilot. You can get onto the web and search how to do something. And occasionally I do that anyway, just because generative AI is not giving me the answers that I need. So let's go through it. So this is what we're aiming for. We want to create a table of baseline characteristics. There's not really any software package that can just sort of produce this without any effort. First of all, you need to go through each variable and you need to look at it, particularly if it's continuous. You need to decide if you're going to summarize it with a mean and a standard deviation or the median and quartiles. And usually we want to have a look at our data anyway, just to check for anything unusual, and that could be any sort of thing. So we wouldn't just sort of try to get software to print out this table. So we want to be able to explore the data and use that to create our own table, most likely in Excel. To keep the video manageable, I am not going to go through every single step. I'm going to take you through the most difficult parts when first starting to use Python. And then the other bits that I don't show you, it's because I think it's probably going to be a lot easier and you won't need any help. You just ask Copilot how to do it and it should give you relatively good advice. The data we're working with is available on Dryad, and I have also uploaded a CSV version to the learning materials. You can get the information about what the different codes mean for the categorical variables in the README file, and it should also give a longer description of each variable. So we're not going to summarize all of them, but equally, I don't expect that everyone knows what this risk score is. I certainly didn't. I mean, I can take a guess, but I had to look it up in the file. Okay, so to get started, I'm using VS Code. You can use any development environment. This is free. It should be available on the lab computers, and it's used in some of the other units as far as I am aware. So when you first open it, you'll probably get a screen something like this, and you need to tell Visual Studio which language you want to work in. So it can do any language. Well, maybe there's some languages it can't do, I don't know. It can do a lot of languages, and you have to tell it you want to use Python. So over in the extensions, you can search for Python and you should just be able to click and install it. I've already got it on my computer, so I don't need to install it. The other thing that you might have to do is, if you want to use Copilot, it does want you to create a free account on GitHub and sign in. So go to the GitHub Copilot options and follow the links to create your account, and then it wants to authenticate, and you might have to go back and forth between the GitHub website and Visual Studio to get that working, but just follow the instructions and let me know if you have any problem. Okay, so once you've got that installed, we need to open up a folder. And this is how we tell Python where to look for files if we want to open a data file, and where to save files to. Now, every time I run some code or do something, I'm going to pause the video briefly just to make sure things work, because nothing goes wrong as often as Python goes wrong in my experience. So I'll always just pause just to check what is happening and then bring you back in. So I apologize for any jumps in the video, but I think that's the most efficient way to do it. Okay, so I've opened up a week 1 folder, and I have in here my NAFLD CSV file. So that is it stands for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Hopefully you took a quick look at the data so you kind of know what the letters stand for. I have a new Python file started. So if you don't have that yet, you can go to File, New File, and choose Python. You can work with a Jupyter Notebook file if you're used to that style from using Google Colab or some other format. It won't really change the code, it just changes the look and feel. We have the console down the bottom, and it's mostly going to show the terminal, which is telling us whenever we run a script, it's going to tell us what it's done. If this is not open for you, It'll probably open as soon as you run something, but also you can go to the three dots terminal and say new terminal, and it will open that up. I have Copilot open on the side. It has a couple of modes for that I haven't played around with. I'm just leaving it on ask because I don't know how that changes with an agent. If anyone experiments with that, let me know. And I'm just leaving it on the default AI model, which is the GPT 4.1. So what we're going to do is go through the process of getting started as if I was getting Copilot to help me. Now, getting started with data analysis in Python is far more difficult than just learning a new technique once you're already familiar with it. One of the reasons is that to get started, we need to do some fairly generic tasks, and there may be a lot of ways to do them, and it's difficult to know which way is the best. If you haven't done it before, how are you supposed to know? So we're going to go through the process of how we can get Copilot to give us information about the best way to do it, rather than just trusting it. One of the difficulties in this sort of tutorial is it does actually say different things every time I try this. So it's often a surprise to me what it says, and the errors can be a little bit different each time. So there's two options for getting good advice when you're getting started. One is to be very specific in the questions that you ask Copilot, and we'll do that first. And the second is to do this thing where it says attach context. And this means give it us a few clues about what you want to do, and then we'll give you better advice. So what you can do is in this folder, put my example code for week 1, and it will read that and it will use that to help it give you relevant advice. It's not a guarantee that it'll give you the same technique that I have used, but it will give you more clues. But let's try it without attaching any context, just so you can see the variety of, I guess, mistakes and perhaps misleading information, just because you really have to be in control of it. Don't just assume that Copilot can read your mind and it knows what you're trying to do. So the first thing that we want to do is write a comment. So we should start all our code with a comment about the objective of the code below it. And a comment in Python is with a hash. And all I want to do is open up my CSV data file. So open the nafld.csv data file. And this time it's giving me good advice straight away. So it wants to import pandas, which is a library. Anytime I want to use a command from this library, I use the prefix PD. That's what that's telling me to do. And then it's telling me to read the NAFLD. This is actually a little bit frustrating for me because I have done this many, many times, and every other time I have done this, it has given me bad advice to start with. And so I'm worried that if you do it, you will get bad advice instead of getting this advice. So let's pretend I'm not sure if this is the correct way to do it. And I'm going to ask Copilot for some more information. How many ways can I open a data file? I don't really need to say in Python because it can tell that I'm using it already. So, oh my goodness, every time I ask this question, it gives me more options. The first time I asked it, I think it gave me 3 or 4, and then the next time it gave me 5, and now it's giving me 6. So it's telling me that there's these different ways of doing it. And if I don't really understand the nuances of these different ways, it's difficult for me to make a choice. However, Python is a general language and it's used for a bunch of things. I would go so far as to say statistics and data analysis is one of the worst reasons to use Python. I would prefer to use almost anything else rather than Python for this sort of task. However, that is what we're doing. So let's tell it that we're doing data analysis and see if it gives us any advice. I'm doing data analysis. So it can see that I've already got this code up here, which it gave me. And it's telling me, great, you're doing the right thing. If I didn't have this up here, it would probably tell me that pandas is the best way to do it for data analysis. Let me just ask and see what it says. Is pandas the best option for data analysis? Yes. So these are the types of questions that it is useful to ask Copilot if you're trying to do something, especially if it feels like what you're trying to do is way more difficult than it should be. Although to be fair, often in Python, things are way more difficult than they should be. So anyway, we'll have a look at it. So we should have been able to read in this data file and probably just check that it has the file name correct. It can technically see it in the folder, but it might still get it wrong. And then we want to look at the data file, show the, yeah. So I'm going to show this first 5 rows of the data. There is also a way to open this up in a Pandas GUI and display it in a separate window. I think I'm going to skip that just because it does generate errors and it doesn't always work and it's a little bit frustrating. But we'll do the first 5 rows to check that it has displayed properly. And then I want to also count the number of rows and count the number of columns because that will help me see if I have imported the data correctly. Count the number of rows in the data. Good. And then after this, we'll run it and see what happens. And it won't count the number of columns. Good. Okay. So, oh, even show the column names. I don't think we'll worry about that because we are going to see the first 5 rows. So let's pause there, run this, and check that we don't have any errors. Okay, so I should have also said you should just save the file after you've changed the code and then you click the play button is to run it. It seems to have done it all correctly, which is nice. I can see the variable names and some data. And ideally, you would have already looked at the data in Excel so you know what you're aiming for. It tells me it has, oh no, this is just the header information, 5 rows. I was trying to work out why are there only 5 rows? There's a lot more data than that. But then it has counted all the rows. So 1,592 rows. So that's how many people are in the study and 24 columns. That is correct. If you're not sure if it has imported it correctly, that's where you could open it up in Excel and just take a look, or try the Pandas GUI if you want to see it like that. So I have gone through this option of trying to work out the best way to do it. There are a lot of options for importing it, but once it knows that you're using Pandas and you're doing data analysis, these steps should be relatively straightforward. The other option for getting better help when you get started is to add in extra files so that it can see more information. So if you want to learn how to do this process for yourself, but you don't want to have to spend too much time working out if it's giving you good or bad advice, what you can do is put my example code in here and it will read that and it will use that to help give you advice. So I'm going to pause and add that in and we'll see how that changes the advice that it gives me. Okay, so I've added this in. It's still giving me the same hint as before. I might just briefly open this up to show you what's in this file. I have started with importing the libraries, and I've also put an extra comment here that if you don't have these libraries already installed on your computer, you may need to do that first. So if you had run this script and you got an error saying it couldn't find pandas, hopefully Copilot would have told you how to install it, and that's to type in pip install pandas. So you would just go down to here and type pip install pandas. And you only need to do that once on each computer that you use, because that just loads it onto the computer, and then once you have it downloaded, it should be able to import it fine. These are all the libraries I have imported. I hate those hints keep showing up. I have to be careful where I hover the mouse. I've read in the data file, viewed the first few rows of data. This code looks slightly different. That's okay for looking at the rows and columns. And then we can see the next step. So if you have this example code here, it's quite possible that Python will sort of be reading this in the background and give you a clue as to how to do this. But we'll see what it tells us. So basically in the data set here that we can see for the for sex, age, and the NAFLD, we have codes, and what we would like are labels, because if we're doing a graph of any of these things, having age category 2 and age category 3, etc., is meaningless. We don't know what that is. So we need to have the labels in here. I've put in some example code for a couple of the variables, and you could try a few more. So let's ask Copilot how to do this. Add labels to categorical variables age and NAFLD. So this first line is telling me that I have to make sure it's reading it as type category. Because it's numbers, the default is to treat it as continuous, and that's for the age variable, and then the same for the NAFLD variable. So it's done the first step, but it hasn't actually told me how to do the next step, because I don't want to show the data types of each column. So I'm going to be more specific. I'm going to say add labels yes and no to NAFLD. And it has put them in the order no, yes for 0, 1. That's the order that I have them there. So let's hope that's correct, but you should definitely check. You should definitely check the README file, because it's quite easy to get that mixed up. Will it know that I want to do age as well? Yes. Yes. And this is where it is definitely getting it from my existing file, because it can't know this already. And actually, I don't know if that is correct. I think that might be wrong. Yeah, it starts at 40 to 49. So it has used this as sort of a template, I think. I'm going to accept it all. But then I need to fix it up. So it starts at 40 to 49. And I'm checking my existing code, but you should open up the README file and check the README file. 70 to 79. Close bracket. No. Yes. So the code hinting might be a little bit frustrating if it's trying to do more than you want. Now, this will be doing stuff, but we can't see what it's doing unless we tell it to print something to the console or get it to output something. So before I run this, I want to actually summarize. Oh, I could do it that way too. I was going to say let's summarize age and summarize the NAFLD, but it's telling me it'll just show the first 5 rows with updated labels. And actually that's fine too, because all I want to do is check that that has worked correctly. Okay, good. So let's run that code. And we have an error, which is good, because I was a little bit worried we'd do a whole example and not get any errors. So we can read the error ourselves and try to work out what it is. When you're getting started with programming, I think it can be a little bit tricky to intuit errors. So what you can do instead, if you're just looking at that going, I don't know what a key error is, and why is NAFLD the problem? I know that this is my data set and it looks like the NAFLD up there. But we can put the error into Copilot and just see what it says. So it says this error means that the column does not exist in your data frame, and this could be due to a typo. And it's absolutely spot on. So if you had the data open in a different window, you went back up to look at your initial summary, hopefully you would notice that that's actually in all caps. So we were thrown off because the data file is in lowercase, but the actual variable for whether or not people have the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is in all capitals. And code is, in most cases, is case sensitive. Maybe there's some languages that aren't. You can let me know if you're aware of one. So the only thing we want to change is we don't want to change the data frame name. We just want to change the variable name. So NAFLD, oh, FLD. And we need to go through and do this everywhere. Now, you don't have to do this manually. You could cut and paste this code into Copilot and ask it to fix it for you. And depending on how much you're trying to do, that might work. You could also do a search replace or find replace. The rest of it should be fine because I think the age is in lowercase. So let's pause and run that again. Okay, and we get another error. And while it's frustrating to get these errors, I think it is good that I'm getting them as a demonstration so that you get better advice on how to fix them. So there's an attribute error from the properties of categories, and categories is a function, and it's telling me I can't do stuff. So again, I've cut and pasted the error into Copilot, and it says you can't do this directly. You have to use rename categories. The thing is, it gave me this code in the first place, so why would it give me wrong code? And the answer to that is I don't know. It could be that this is a previous version of the library and that this used to work and then it got updated and now it doesn't work. It could just be that it has made a mistake. If I go to my example code, I do actually have it as rename categories. So even though it could see this, it still didn't get it completely right. And I guess that's just one of the frustrating things. So I'm going to fix this up. It has told me how to fix it, and you can copy this code using the copy function. And hopefully this will now work. Okay, so now we can see, it hasn't worked. 1 second. So it doesn't have any errors anymore, but it hasn't worked. And this is because, and I completely missed this when I was looking at it, it hasn't reassigned the variables. So it said call these categories, but it hasn't fixed it basically in the data set. So we need this little bit here to say that this variable is now going to be this with the renamed categories. So this is one of those things that is really frustrating because it could have told us that from the start. And it's possible that when you try it, it will tell you that from the start. Because it is a little bit different every time. Every time you use it. Sorry, get distracted there. Okay, I think we've just about got it. So let's run this again. Okay, so we've got it now. We have the NAFLD, yes, no, and we have the age categories, and you could go through and do the sex and any of the other categorical variables if you want to practice. The last thing I'm going to try and do, just to stop the video from being too long, and probably one of the more frustrating things, is to actually get a summary of these categorical variables. And then in terms of exploring the variables and looking at graphs, etc., usually that's easier. It kind of knows how to do graphs pretty well. So there's example code here for doing a bar chart, histograms, and I don't think I've got a box plot, but you could ask it to do a box plot and it will probably do that too. So there's quite a lot of code here, but actually it tends to generate that fairly well. So I won't go through all the graphs. Let me know if you have trouble with it, but I will go through the summarize because you would think that this would be very straightforward. And it can be frustratingly not straightforward, but let's ask it to do a summary. Summarize age groups within the NAFLD groups. Okay. I do not want to do that. So this is doing two things. It's creating a summary and storing it in this variable, and then it's going to print that variable. So let's try this and see what it looks like. And it has worked, it's done it. This might not be the most helpful way to format the data, and it also hasn't given me the percentages. So I might need to give it a more specific instruction. I could ask it the different ways to summarize variables. I might need to tell it that I either want to pivot or to cross tabulate. So pivot is the Excel term, cross tabulate is the sort of statistics term. But Python is a little amalgamation of both, so it's hard to know which one will work better. But let's see the options. What are the different ways to cross tabulate or pivot to categorical variables? If you are not familiar with the specific terms, just use the ones that you know, or just ask it how to summarize the two variables and see what it says. However, you do have to have some foundation knowledge in order for this to work. The AI is just not clever enough to do it without human input, which is a good thing. Otherwise, we would actually all be out of jobs if AI was as clever as people think it is. So it's giving us a few options. We have cross tabulate, we have group by, we have a pivot table. It hasn't actually got the option that I went with at the end when I was working through this. And I think it's just because summarizing variables is something which is very common and done across a lot of different tasks, not just in statistics. And so there's lots of different ways to do it. So you could try each of these ways. In the end, this was one thing where I thought, Copilot is actually not giving me the best option, and I did some Google searching instead. And I think that the best way to do it might be to use this package called Table 1. So if you notice in our example table, if I bring the paper up again, this is Table 1. And this is really common in health papers specifically, also education and some other disciplines, that the first table in a paper is the description of your participants. It might be baseline characteristics, it might be called participant characteristics, kind of depends a little bit on the study design. But Table 1 is usually a summary. And so this package is called Table 1. And they state on the website, if you look up the information about Table 1, it's not perfect. It can't do everything for every situation, but it will do perhaps a better job of some of the other things. So we would need to import the Table 1 library, and it has the option to give us some summaries in different formats. So if you're looking through my code, you can certainly try crosstab, group by, and pivot table. They will all work. What have I done here? I've done something a little bit different. That's okay. As I say, it's a generic task where there's lots of ways to do it. And then you could try the Table 1. So I'll briefly run this so we can see what that looks like. Okay, so it has run all my code, so you can see a graph coming up on the side here. This is a much more useful table because I have the counts and the percentages, and I expect that I can cut and paste this into Excel. If it doesn't sort of format correctly, then you can tell it to export to Excel, and that will export a summary, and that does work because I just tried it. It's not going to do it perfectly. You'll notice that it's given us the NAFLD by NAFLD, which we don't really need, but presumably you could put a few variables into this. So scrolling through the rest of the code, you can see that the stacked bar chart has come up fine. You could change the colors, you could turn it into a percentage chart. And then the histograms, it has done fine too. And usually this sort of code Python is pretty good at. The more specific the task is to a particular goal, such as in data analysis, usually the simpler it becomes to find the code. So at the very bottom, I've got an example of the t-test, and this is very simple because this is fairly standard. There are still options for different libraries which might format the output differently. But there's fewer options to choose from than there are with something like summarizing variables. Okay, we've hit the half an hour mark. Hopefully that was a useful introduction in learning how to navigate Copilot and getting started with Python. If you're brave, just go at it without any context. If you're worried you're going to get frustrated, maybe add the context or just work through the example code first and then try to do similar things with different variables.